5:30 and 8:30 on the Eastern time. So we're gonna take one more minute for everybody to get in. And for those of you who already joined with the questions, you're welcome to ask all your questions in the Q&A session. So we're gonna answer your questions in the later half of the webinars. Our colleagues is going to collect them and hopefully answer them one by one for you. And all right, I think we're right around time, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this started. Welcome everybody to today's GoElite webinar. Today we're gonna talk about, the H1B lottery. If you're not selected, what would be the best option for you? And so this session, we're gonna go over the 2025 fiscal year H1B recap analysis by our immigration attorney, Marta Meng. She is very experienced in her field as a immigration lawyer. And then she's also going to introduce, more alternative options for you guys in terms of working in the US, including Cap-exempt H1Bs, O1s, L1s, Day 1 CPT, and what would be the better option for your specific situations. So this would be the first half of our webinar. The second half will be a longer half of live Q&A session with Marta. And if you have any questions after this webinar, feel free to scan our QR code, or if you wanted to be connected with the immigration lawyer, you are free to scan the code. We can connect you with her or with our consultant if you have questions on Day 1 CPT. So a little bit of background information on today's speaker. So Marta, she is the managing attorney at Meng Law. Sorry, I had a typo in here. I apologize. At Meng Law Group, she's the founder and managing attorney. She is a very experienced immigration attorney, specifically in O1 green card application as well as the L1 fields. And before we jump in, I'm going to briefly go through what our company do. So we are GoElite. We are located in Los Angeles, California. So we are a professional consulting agencies dedicated to helping international students thrive in the US. So our main services will be Day 1 CPT university applications, F1 reinstatement or emergency transfer assistance, as well as change of status consultation and assistance. So we are certified by AIRC as one of the biggest education agencies in the US. We are the 6th certified agencies in the US. And also we are on Google reviews. So feel free to check us out on Google. We currently have 340 Google reviews, 5 stars. So feel free to check us out. And we're really grateful for all of you filling your wonderful reviews. And then here is our social media platforms as well as our contact information. If you have questions after this session, feel free to ask us so that we can further assist you. So without further ado, I will stop sharing from my end. And Marta, you can take the stage.
All right, thank you very much, Ryan, and thanks to GoElite for having me here today. And thank you all for taking time from your busy day to join us for today's webinar, the alternatives to H1B. All right, let me share my screen first. All right, so first some disclaimer. So today's presentation is for educational purpose only. There's no legal representation, relationship established, including any of the Q&A. That's also based on some general information and just for general educational purpose only, right? And as Ryan mentioned, I am an immigration attorney. I have been practicing for almost a decade now. I do mostly employment-based immigration cases, including work visas. So among those work visas, a lot of those are like H visas. And of course, there are also other work visas such as O, E, and TN, and any other work visas that may be suitable to the employee based on the job categories. During this process, we also deal with F1 status a lot because most of those work status are like changed from the F1 within the US. So we are very familiar with those issues that can come up during the adjudication in this process. We also handle a lot of employment-based immigration petitions, such as all those EB1, 2, 3, and the 5 cases. So we're also going to cover that a little bit if you decide to start the green card process right now, if you can do that right now, and what are the things you might need to be mindful about. And also, I want to let you know I really love talking about these F1 issues. These F1 status issues is dear and near to my heart because I initially came as an F1 status as on F1 visa as well. So I know all these challenges like F1 international students are facing when you are studying the US and when you start looking for jobs. All right, here we are. So I know we have a lot to cover today, and we also want to make time for all these Q&A session. So I want to go over these topics, giving everybody just a big picture of what are the key concepts like under each topic. So basically, like what are the common work visas as an alternative to H1B? I'm not going to go over all these nuances and details of all these work visas, but I want to let you know what are usually the challenge for each work visa so that you can see if that may be applicable to you. I'm going to also cover the CPT, which is very commonly used practical training as a kind of work authorization for F1 student. So I'm going to talk about the current adjudication trend on CPT. So for example, if someone is changing status from F1 CPT to H1B or to another status, what kind of issues USCIS might raise when they adjudicate those kind of applications? We do see some changes in the trend when they raise issues with CPT lately, but those are still manageable. So I want to just bring that up so you can be more prepared if you encounter one, just so that you know it is not something very unique to your situation, probably. It is some common RFEs these days. Also, I'm going to just briefly introduce the different paths to permanent residency, which a lot of times we call that green card. That term we're going to be used interchangeably, either permanent residency or green card. All right. Let's get started. So the first thing is all these work visas and green card applications, they don't have to depend on each other. So you don't have to be in any status or you don't have to get any work visas in order to apply for any of the green card or the permanent residency. So even you are in F1 status right now, you can start any of the green card process as long as you qualify. You don't have to be in, like, say, H1B in order for the employer to sponsor you for EB2, EB3. You don't have to be in O1 in order to apply, say, for those EB1A or NIW cases. So that's the first thing. And one thing I hope everyone can learn from this webinar that you don't have to be in any specific status in order to apply for the immigrant petition. And then also like no matter how long you hold any status, like say if you hold any H1 or O1 status for a long time, it's not gonna automatically turn into a green card. That's unlike some other countries. I know in some countries, if you hold certain work visas for certain amount of time, then it's gonna automatically convert into a green card. That's not going to be the case for the US immigration law. If you want to get a green card, you have to proactively, affirmatively apply for it. That is also why, like, you want to start planning for it as soon as possible, because for a lot of countries, especially for China-born and Indian-born applicants, there's a pretty significant wait time. So the earlier you initiate this process, the sooner you're going to get the green card. All right. Okay. So these are the common work visas most international students would use after graduation as a form of work authorization. The first one is the OPT or the STEM OPT extension. So for those of you who are in the STEM major, you would be qualified for another 24 months of OPT extension following the initial 12 months of OPT. All right, I'm sure you know about that, so you can apply for that for sure. There's this H1B. I know a lot of you may have already participated in this year's H1B lottery. We haven't really got the data from USCIS yet, like how many registrants were there this year. Based on our firm's data and some discussion with other practitioners in the field, it seems like this year's selection rate is maybe a little over 30% or around 30%. So that is much higher than previous years because this year, as we know, there's this reform and it is beneficiary centric, meaning, it doesn't really matter how many companies is sponsoring you, you're going to be only counted once as like one registrant in the overall pool. So that is an effort made by USCIS to combat like fraud and misuse, abuse of the system. It seems to be working since the selection rate is higher this year compared with previous years. There are other organizations such as certain nonprofit organizations that may be exempt from the cap. That is a different topic. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth into this, but you don't have to be a research nonprofit. I do notice some of the organization may be under the impression that they have to be a research nonprofit in order to qualify for the cap exemption. That is one of the criteria. That is one of the options. But a lot of other nonprofit, they can still qualify for the cap exemption if they have some sort of affiliation with higher education institutions. So if you work for a nonprofit, I would highly recommend that you work with the attorney to double check like if your organization might be qualified for the cap exemption. So you don't have to participate in the lottery in order to change into the H1B status. Another visa I really want to kind of highlight a little bit today is the O1. That is for extraordinary circumstance, like for extraordinary achievements. So that type of visa may seem like really hard to get when you hear the term, extraordinary achievements. But in the past 2 years, the current administration has released multiple policy updates and kind of like relaxed the criteria for O1 quite a bit. So that is something more attainable to a lot of students right now than before. I'm going to just quickly go over the criteria later in the other slide. But just want to let you know, like say, for example, one very common occupation, architect. We see a lot of architectural firms would petition for their architect H1B, and some of them might not be selected, right? A lot of those architects have already worked on some of, high profile projects. They work for very renowned organizations. They actually might be qualified under O1B. So definitely look into O1 if you have done some like great jobs like for your company and your company is a well-known company in the industry. Another common one would be L1. That's for intracompany transferee. That can be either for managers, that's L1A, or that can be specialized workers. The biggest challenge for L is it requires it requires 1 year qualifying experience in the foreign affiliate company. So if you haven't worked at a foreign company yet, that means you have to leave the US for at least 1 year in order to satisfy this requirement. Some of the students may ask like, oh, can I work for that foreign company within the US? No, it has to be physically working for that foreign company. So if you want to take advantage of the L1, that means you have to depart the US and work for your company's overseas office for at least 1 year in a qualifying position. Some students may not like departing the US, then most likely L1 visa won't be a viable option for you if you don't want to leave the US. Of course, there's E2. I don't know how many of you, maybe some of you have already got like a passport. You are a national from certain countries that have treaties with the US. A very common one would be Canada. A lot of you may have like Canadian passport, then E2 may also be an option you can look into. But it works really well for those, especially who want to start their own business. But if you want to use E2 to work for a company, it does require that the owner of the company has to be from the same treaty country as you. So that is a restraint to the use of E2 as a work visa. All right, so those are the common options to H1B. All right, so that's for O1. There are two types of O1. There's O1A, there's O1B. Generally speaking, O1B has like a more relaxed criteria than the O1A. O1B is for those who do like artwork, like work in like art. The O1A is for science, education, business, those kind of other field. They have very different criteria. They may look a little intimidating or overwhelming. It seems like a very high bar, to meet, but I definitely recommend you explore these options with the attorney you work with, especially if you work for any well-known companies, because the criteria have been kind of relaxed quite a bit in the past 2 years with some policy update. All right, then I'm gonna get into CPT. I know for a lot of the students, if not selected in the H1B or for some other reason, they decide to continue studying in the US. They might enroll in another program, continue study as a student, and then when they study, they may apply for some sort of work authorization. And CPT, the curricula practical training, is a very commonly used work authorization for those students. A lot of students do hear about, I won't say like rumor, but those stories of, CPT is getting more scrutiny from USCIS. I would say overall, the trend these years is that USCIS does seem to review F1 status overall, like more strictly. All right. They do want to make sure all these F1 students have been maintaining their status when they are in the US. So that does happen when an F1 student changes status from F1 to another non-immigrant status. For example, that can be H1B, that can be O1, or any of the other work visa we just mentioned. That can also happen if this F1 student apply for the green card directly from the F1 status and file the I-45 when the student is still in F1, then during this I-45 adjudication, USCIS would ask for a lot of the proof of the student maintaining status in the US. So that does come up. There are some more specific RFE issues related to CPT. These are the common issues we have seen lately from USCIS regarding CPT. I would say it does seem like USCIS have been kind of enforcing the rules about CPT more literally, including some of those like show the program or the CPT is an integral part of an established curriculum. So they do seem to like read the rule like more closely and ask for proof from the students to show the compliance under those CPT-related rules. So understand what are the compliance requirements of CPT is the key to your successful maintenance of status. So making sure you do everything right, you maintain like the full course of study, you can show that the CPT use is an integral part of an established curriculum, and you show that the CPT is directly related to the student's major area of study. Those are very important to your maintenance of status. So where do those come from? They really come from this section of the CFR, the code. So you can see from here that it requires the F1 student still study on a full-time basis. So CPT is not an independent status. It's just a type of work authorization still as an F1 student. So you need to make sure you're still a full-time student. That is very important. And some of the programs are not eligible for CPT, such as those English language programs. Those are not eligible. And we have to show this practical training, basically the position you're taking at those companies are directly related to your major. And the major here is referring to the major of your CPT program. All right. And then we also need to show like this program, like your CPT work is kind of like part of your like program, like the integral part of the established curriculum. So that's for the benefit of your study. So we have to show the relationship here. And also the rule actually asks for the sponsoring employer to have some sort of cooperative agreement with the school. It's getting a little technical here because in the past, we haven't really seen USCIS raising this issue, but recently we have seen some. So what kind of agreement does this have to be? You know, I know some employers may not have such agreement with the school. Some schools do have a very formal agreement. Some may just ask for a statement. So there is some flexibility here. All right. And if you apply for the CPT and you work under CPT for more than 1 year, full-time, okay, only full-time. Full-time means more than 20 hours a week. Then you won't be eligible for the post-completion OPT anymore. What if some of the students may ask like, oh, what if I have already had OPT in the past and I am currently in a program at the same level, then am I still allowed to use CPT anymore? Yes, the answer is yes. During the last administration, so during the Trump administration, there was some new policy regarding that, like using up all the OPT time and then use CPT again. That was an issue during the Trump administration, but right now, not anymore. If you used OPT in the past, you can still use CPT, even that's the same educational level. All right, and one more thing to remember that you can only start working after the DSO has already endorsed your CPT. So you cannot start working without that I-20 showing like your CPT has been granted. So those are some of the compliance requirements of CPT. One new trend is about the definition of online class, because now that the COVID has ended, and most of the campus are having these in-person classes again, and the USCIS policy is back to normal. Like the F1 student cannot have all classes online, right? So it has to meet the physical attendance requirement. But what if a class does offer online teaching for some sessions, but only require physical attendance as part of it? Right now, that is still not considered online class. So online class refers to those classes that doesn't require any physical attendance at all. So if this is more kind of like a hybrid class, currently it is not considered online class. I think this is a very interesting area that the DHS is considering maybe issuing some policy guidance later on. But right now, that is the rule. As long as there's some physical attendance requirement, that is not considered a pure like online class. All right. So those are all about CPT and all these other common alternative work visas to H1B. Just gonna quickly go through this green card application a little bit because some of the students might want to start preparing for the green card right away. One important thing to remember is the green card involves two steps. All right, you have to file a petition. And then if you're in the US, you file a form called I-485. That is the actual application for the green card, but it has to be based on something. So that can be based on a family, like a relative's petition. That can be based on the employer petition, or it can be based on a self-petition. So the I-485 cannot be filed on its own. It usually is based on some underlying petition. And for some countries, you cannot file those two concurrently. There's a wait time there. So I am posting this visa bulletin from May 2024. So that's next month. All right. I don't know how many of you might be familiar with the visa bulletin. I'm just going to assume a lot of you may know how this works. All right. So these are the countries and all the cutoff date for each country. And this is for employment-based cases only. I'm not including the family-based cases here. So the first column, it says like first, second, third, that's EB1, 2, 3. All right. And you may see some dates under China mainland born, India. That means for those who file the petition before that date, they can file the I-485 next month. All right, that kind of give you an idea how long the wait time is. So let's say, for example, China mainland born EB2, that is February the 1st, 2020. So those who file the EB2, like be that I-140 or maybe the labor certificate back in 2020, before February the 1st, now they are eligible to file the I-485 next month. So you can kind of see, just to estimate the wait time to be a little over 4 years, China mainland born EB2. And for India, same concept. For those who filed the EB2 I-140 or labor certification before April the 15th, 2012, they are eligible for the I-485 filing next month. So that is wait time. So for most of the students, if you do intend to stay in the US for for a little bit longer, you want to get permanent residency here, it's very important you start planning what kind of path you want to use to get the permanent residency, how long that may take, and start planning, all these filing. For those who have a pretty significant wait time to get the green card, you have to maintain your underlying status until you can file the I-485. So you still have to explore all these other work visas after graduation if you want to stay here and wait for your green card. So just because you file a petition, that doesn't give you any underlying status. You have to maintain that status until you can file for your I-485. So if you're interested in planning for the filing of the permanent residency, that is something you might want to factor in. All right, I think that's pretty much it for today's presentation. We're gonna get to the questions first.
Absolutely. I think I do have a few things to add, if I may. The first thing is that I want to thank Marta so much for bringing up, the logistic and also specific about choosing day one CPT programs, because we sometimes see lots of students who wanted to do day one CPT, have little knowledge about that, just go for a particular program without knowing how do I make the decision if or not this program is the better choice for me? For example, I think Marta mentioned something about on-site frequencies, programmed relatabilities with your CPT work, CPT corporate agreement, and stuff like that. I just want to give a general recommendation for everybody to talk to our consultant so that you have a better picture of what this program is specifically about. And also, besides day one CPT, I think also today's another topic that everybody is anticipating would be about the H1B result. I think we touched a little bit on that on the first half, but I think a lot of people asked in the Q&A, so I wanted to jump right into it before, if that is possible. With Marta is just that if in a possible second round H1B is possible, or in general, what would be like the percentages that people are getting selected so far by this year's?
Oh, sorry, Ryan. Can you repeat the last part a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think lots of people asked about, more about the H1B results. So I think we wanted to kind of discuss it a little bit before our questions. So for example, like from your context, basically, how are the percentages are looking like for this year's H1B, as well as is there any possibility, like prediction wise, on the second round H1B?
Yeah, so based on our firm's data and some of the other firms I have discussed with, it looks like this year's selection rate is around 30%. But I that's just based on some data point. We still need the USCIS to release their data to know how many like registrants there were this year, because this year there's the beneficiary centric like the new system launched for this year's H1B lottery. I don't think there should be a second round, just because no matter how many companies are filing for the same beneficiary, it's going to be counted once, and the beneficiary can choose which company they work with. And as long as this beneficiary choose at least one company, then that will be counted as filing. So there won't be a lot of like selected registration like wasted. So I don't see why like those won't proceed to filing if they are selected. But I could be wrong. Maybe there are other factors affecting the actual filing. But because of this year's reform, I don't think a second round is very likely.
Thank you so much for your address on the H1B situation. I think we are ready to jump right into our Q&A session. If you do have a questions or inquiries that you wanted to be in contact with Marta, this is her information. So feel free to check, her website as well as her other contacts. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so we can get into the Q&As. So all right. So first question will be about lotteries. We answered this, and we're going to go to the second one. So is it feasible for a finance professional to gain EB1 approval within a year?
Well, if we are, first of all, is it possible for a finance professional to get EB1A approval? That is definitely possible, but it really depends on how strong the person's background is, whether the person can meet all the criteria. I mean, not all, but at least 3 out of the 10 criteria of EB1 and prove, the person is at the very top of the field. That is possible. But then as to the actual processing time, if we're talking about the processing time for the petition itself, yeah, that can be done within a year. But depending on the person's country of birth, if the person is a China mainland-born applicant or an Indian-born applicant, then there's currently visa backlog. So the overall time would be definitely more than 1 year right now.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next one. So this one will be a more unique situation. So we can get your like general feedback on this kind of question. So if my I-40 is approved and I will be relocating outside of the US. So if I have L1 visa when I come back, should I still need to redo the perm or not?
Well, I wonder if that's the same employer. So if the employer is the same, then you can still come back and reuse the I-140. Of course, if the offered position remains the same, the employer still plans to offer the same position as stated in the I-140 to you when you come back. But if that's a different position or if that's a different employer, then yeah, you would have to redo either the perm or maybe the I-140. However, the previous priority date, you can still retain that priority date for your subsequent filing.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next one, does doing a DBA program, so Doctoral Business Administration, help in applying for an EB1 visa?
Not necessarily. The degree is not a requirement for EB1. So out of all the 10 criteria for EB1A, it doesn't include any degree requirement. But of course, if the person pursues a doctor degree, the person may be more likely to publish scholarly papers, may be more likely to meet some of the criteria there, but just the degree itself doesn't necessarily guarantee a successful EB1A approval.
Absolutely. Next one, I think we can also try to approach this as like a more general term. So if I work in a nonprofit organization, right? So how does my H1B gonna be filled? Again, this will be depending on the case by case situation with the company. But I think if you could provide like a general background in terms of, the eligibilities of H1B and green card, that should be very helpful. And will they be also be able to provide I-140s, and can I transfer my H1B later on to another nonprofit?
Right. So it really depends. If the nonprofit organization can qualify as a cap-exempt employer, then you don't have to go through the lottery. You can just change into the H1B status directly. And as to the transfer, it also depends on whether the new employer, the other organization, whether that is a cap-exempt employer. If you want to change employer to another, then that other nonprofit would have to be a cap-exempt employer as well. There's some exception. If you work at another organization concurrently while you're currently working at a cap-exempt organization, a nonprofit, then you can do that if that's concurrent. But if it's changed of employer, then the other one has to be cap exempt as well, or you will have to go through the lottery in order to work for the other organization. They can still petition employees for I-140 as long as they can prove, like say their paying ability and meet all the criteria for the I-140.
Thank you for that. Let's move on to the next one. So this would be a very classic question. So for a regular H1B, if they get picked by the lottery, can I transfer it to another employer before they even file for it?
No, you cannot transfer the registration. You have to proceed to the filing with the employer who registered for you.
Mhm. Thank you. And this questions, I think we touched on this regarding doctoral degree before. So if I finish some masters, um, they wanted to learn more specifically about requirements and EB1. We talked about this in a previous question. So if you missed that question, you can always go back to the recordings. But I think Marta mentioned that in general, doing a PhD wouldn't necessarily be relevant with your EB1 requirements. But then you can always build a case based on, what has came out from the program, I believe. And then moving on, so I work remotely from Georgia. Is it better for me to attend day one CPT on the East Coast than attend day one CPT on the West Coast? So I can kind of give like an insight from a consultant perspective, and then maybe Marta can kind of jump on to see if I'm correct or not. So first things on context. So Westcliff University does also have a campus on the East Coast. Maybe you're looking at the Los Angeles or Irvine campus, but they also have a campus in Florida and Miami, depending on what kinds of programs you're looking for. And then I would say if if you are located on the East Coast, I would definitely recommend you to go to a university that is located nearby where you are. But this is just one factor. A lot of other factors should be considered. For example, your workload, your relevance between your current job and then the CPT program classes you study, and also a lot other things, on-site frequencies, homework, workload, a lot of things. So I also wanted to get Marta's view on this. So in general, should I, if I'm in the East Coast, should I go for a school on the East Coast?
I would say wherever you go, the most important is that you need to prove that you are a bona fide student. You do intend to study wherever you go, right? So, and then the other is more about the logistics, whether it is more feasible for you to meet all these physical attendance requirements if you attend the one on the East Coast or the West Coast. So it really is a very personal choice. But as long as you can meet all the compliance requirements of the CPT, then that is okay.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the next one. Is CPT or day one CPT risky when it comes to green card application?
Well, it it actually is the same as like change of status. So when you are at the last step of green card application, when you file for the I-45, usually USCIS would look at your past status history. Same thing when you change into another status, when USCIS adjudicate your change of status into, let's say, H1B or other status, they're going to look at your previous status history as well. So what matters is when you use CPT, have you been complying with all the legal requirements? So that is really the most important.
Absolutely. Moving on. So what are the guidance for selection of a university for day one CPT? What should be done to reduce RFE, or what kind of courses are eligible? And what kind of work is eligible for CPT? So this is a very general and broad questions. I think to Marta's perspective, she shared that in our earlier presentations of, I think, four certain things you need to pay attention to when you're selecting a program. I think if I remember that correctly, it would be whether or not it has an on-site classes, whether or not the CPT is directly related to what you learn in the curriculum, and also if the schools are a legitimate schools, and things like this would also pay into perspective when it comes to selecting your programs. But I will always recommend you to talk to our consultant to get a general recommendation and also a more expert perspective into school selection. So I think all of those questions can be answered if you wanted to talk to a current consultant you've been speaking to. Marta, do you also have something to add to this point?
Right. I think we covered this a little bit in our previous presentation. So right now, those online classes that require some physical attendance are not technically online classes under the CFR definition. So, but if it's indeed like a purely remote class, then the F1 status cannot have more than one class or more than 3 credits per session to count toward the full course of study if that's like an online class. But if you have to, attend in person as part of that course, then that's not currently like technically an online class.
Absolutely. I think we also answered question number 11. It would be a very similar situation. So we're going to jump into question 12. So my OPT ends in August and my DBA program starts in September. So how many days before my OPT expires should I transfer my CVIS to the new school?
Right. The deadline for you to transfer your service would be the end of your OPT grace period. So it looks like you're still good, like with the current end date and the start date of the new program.
Absolutely. And one thing to add is that if you do wanted to start, resume working once your DBA program starts, I will advise you to schedule your CVIS transfer a little bit prior to your OPT ends. For example, 2 weeks earlier or a month earlier should be okay because it takes some time for the university to process the CPT I-20 applications. So and then they will also have a deadline window for you to apply for CPT. So you don't want to transfer to the school too late to miss that CPT application window. And moving on, so we'll love to hear about the possibility of travel internationally while being enrolled in CPT or the green card application process. So I think this is our separate questions. So in terms of the green card applications, we kind of touched on that on its relevance between day one CPT. So I think we can kind of talk about like what are the travel expectations if you're on CPT.
Right. So, first of all, if you want to travel internationally and come back to the US, you will have to come back with a valid visa. So does do you currently have a valid F1 visa or you have to apply for one at the consulate? So if you have to apply for one at a consulate, there's more complication there. It would be more of a challenge if you have to apply for a new visa. Even for those who, let's say, have a current valid F1 visa and now wants to travel on that valid visa when they're enrolled in a new program and using CPT, I have to caution you that when you go through the CBP officer does have a lot of discretion to determine whether you are a bona fide student, whether your main purpose to come back is to study or not. So there is, I would say there definitely is some risk when you go through the border, the customs, because the CBP officer does have a lot of discretion there. So we have definitely seen students who are using CPT can come back successfully on their valid F1 visa with no problem. But definitely we also have seen students turned away, even they have valid F1 status for all sorts of reasons if the CBP officer doesn't believe they're bona fide students.
Great point. And one thing to add is that we did have a couple webinar sessions with former US visa officers before in our YouTube channel. So after this session, we will be sending over emails with today's recordings regarding as well as the YouTube channel. So feel free to check those out if you're interested in travel internationally with CPT. And next one, so I don't have a thesis or research under my name. Could you guide me in general how should I be qualified for O1 or what are the qualifications for O1?
All right, first of all, we need to determine whether you're going to apply for O1B or O1A because they have different criteria. Just for example, like say for O1B, if the person has done some project like that are like well-known projects and they have been playing like a lead role or some starring role in those projects, that can be one criteria met. And then if the company they work for is distinguished, like a company with distinguished reputation, well-known company, and the company is willing to attest that you have played a critical role at the company, that's another criteria met. And then you can also collect letters from industry experts. And that would be one more. So those are for O1B. Right. And then for O1A, same thing, like if you work for a company with distinguished organization, like distinguished reputation, and they consider you playing a critical role at a company. That is one criteria, right? It doesn't require any publication under your name. And then high salary, if you currently receive high salary or you will receive high salary, that can be one of that. And also, like say for awards, some of the awards in the field or some of the media coverage about your work, even that can meet the criteria. So I would say, definitely look into it. O1A has I would say a little higher standard than the O1B, but still, explore these options with the council and see if you can qualify.
Absolutely. And for the next question, so this person is asking about I-539, which I believe would be a change of status form. Did you have any, feedback, or is this something that you wanted to answer?
Yeah, I would say F1 reinstatement takes a really long time. Um, Half a year is really normal for a lot of those reinstatement applications. Sometimes it can take about a year. So I still consider that to be within the normal processing time.
Mhm. Absolutely. And so this question 16, I think we do need a little bit of, context information into your specific situation to provide, because there is no answer in terms of whether doctoral day one CPT or master day one CPT is right for me, because everybody have different shoes, different situations. So I do recommend you to scan the code or talk to a consultant if you have already been talking to, and they will be able to provide the right answer for you based on your unique situation. So next one, if I'm freelancing in entertainment, I apply for day one CPT, but I wanted to understand what are the other options if I wanted to keep freelancing.
I don't know what kind of work you do as a freelancer, but if you work in the entertainment industry, like especially for like say motion pictures, those kind of thing, you might look into the O1B as an option because we do see a lot of the freelance workers in the entertainment industry would apply for the O1 and use that as a sort of work authorization to do all kinds of like more like kind of freelance work. So that is a commonly used visa for those entertainment workers.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next one. So if my EAD is ending until next year, start of next year, I wanted to know, is it possible to join day one CPT? Yes, it is. And what else do I need to know to make sure to continue my H1B attempt? So I do wanted to make sure that CPT or F1 status doesn't have any restriction on you pursuing your H1B. Do you also have something to add?
Correct. So I don't think your H1B filing would be affected by your change of the program. But again, I would want to emphasize that whatever program you decide to enroll in, you have to prove that you're a bona fide student. Like all the student, you still have to make sure you will be a full-time student. You have full course of study. You pursue full course of study. You do all the homework. If a school tells you like, you don't have to do the homework, that is a big red flag. Those are the kind of schools you want to avoid.
Yes, absolutely. If you run into a program that doesn't have on-site requirements, then that will be a red flag as well. So always do more research or talk to somebody from our team. We're able to guide you through those school selections. And moving on, so if the H1B Cap-exempt employer is not e-verified, um, does that have any issue with the Cap-exempt?
The Cap-exempt H1B employer doesn't have to be e-verify. Um, the only circumstance where e-verify is a requirement is for STEM OPT extension. So a company doesn't have to be e-verified in order to petition someone for H1B.
Next one, do universities qualify for Cap-exempt H1B?
I would say most of the universities do, but maybe some of those for-profit universities may not qualify. But for most of the universities out there, nonprofit universities, they qualify, be that public or private.
Mhm. So my company is completely remote. Does that work for L1?
I would say it really depends. Um, For L1, the key question is whether the US company has a qualifying affiliate overseas. And have you ever worked for that foreign affiliate or parent or subsidiary for at least 1 year in a qualifying position? So those are really the key questions to ask to check your eligibility for L1.
Absolutely. Next one. So I think this question is for Marta as an immigration attorney. So do you do national interest waivers, NIW, and if so, what are the requirements?
Yes, we do NIW cases actually quite often. Well, the NIW that's a pretty big topic. All right. I would say it's a very different from like say EB1A or O1 because the criteria like the requirements there are not as specific as those EB1. So for EB1, you know like there are 10 criteria there. There are very specific requirements and you have to meet 3 out of 10. For NIW, there's a lot of room for advocacy. So the only like the one that is that you have to have advanced degree. So basically like graduate degrees. But you can still, use some alternative in lieu of an advanced degree. And then you have to basically prove whatever you decide to do in the US will be of national importance. And then you are qualified to carry out those proposed endeavors. And overall, USCIS believes that it is beneficial for the US to grant you this NIW petition. So you can tell like the requirements are so vague, it doesn't have very specific requirement. But if I have to kind of summarize something, I would say for NIW, you have to show that you can do something unique that can affect like maybe the industry or affect overall like the society. If you can only show like, oh, you have some certificate degrees, you are a good worker at a company, that probably won't qualify for NIW. But if you have published papers or you have done exhibitions, you have all these other achievements showing that you have made some impact in the field, maybe we can use those to apply for the NIW.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next one. So I think this question also lacks a little bit of context. So is working for state government considered as extraordinary experience? So I wouldn't think just working for state government will be considered as that. But Marta, if you wanted to expand on that, that would be
That's
really
that's right. That's right. For either O1 or EB1, they have very specific criteria. So we have to meet at least 3 out of those 8 or 6 or 10 criteria. So merely because someone's working for a US government doesn't really qualify the person. We still have to go through all these analytical like steps to show like the person is eligible.
yes. Does our extraordinary talents have to align with the field of our employer?
It doesn't have to align with the field of the employer. It has to align with the kind of duties that you will perform. So that is the key.
Mhm. So next one, I'm currently on H4. I have never been on F1. Can I still get into a day one CPT school?
Well, CPT is still part of the F1, right? So it's not an independent status. So in order to get CPT, you have to be an F1 student first.
Yes, and that will involve into a change of status. If you do wanted to do CPT and start working in the US, you will have to file for a change of status applications and transition from the H4 to your F1, and then hopefully you can start working in the US. And moving on, so this one will be also regarding a specific personal situations. So let me know if this is possible for you to answer. But should I include my publications in Chinese journals written in Chinese language in O1A applications? Also, do citations in a certain website count besides Google Scholar?
Yeah, like any publication in foreign language can still be included as evidence. It doesn't have to be only US publication.
Absolutely. So next question, is it a bad idea to study the same major from bachelor's degree to a master's day one CPT degree? I think from my perspective as a consultant on day one CPT, we see that very common, not just on the day one CPT field, But in general, people would, for example, get a bachelor in computer science and then get a master's in computer science. This is very common because you shows progression in your education level. You wanted to learn more, you wanted to learn more advanced knowledge as a student. So I personally don't see this as a problem. More problem would be on if you take duplication majors in the same degree level. For example, two computer science masters, that will be a red flag.
It looks like our next question there.
Oh, okay. So, sounds good. I think this question also asks about second masters, uh, completed all CPT for the first semester. Yes. So I wouldn't recommend, as again, I wouldn't recommend the same major with duplications in the same classes. But if you do another master's, that should totally be okay. So next one, CPT has to be directly related to a program of study. What documents does university or companies have to submit? I assume this is for the RFE.
That's right. I would say it's really case by case. You have to show what you're doing at the company. So that would usually include some like work samples or some statement or some letters from the company explaining what do you do on a day-to-day basis. And also like the transcript, the syllabus of the courses you take at the school. And also statement, detailing what you learn from those courses and how you apply those in your work. So those are some of the common evidence you might want to collect in order to respond to that kind of RFE.
All right, I think we are at the end of today's webinar session. We are 1 hour in, so I do want to thank Marta first for giving us those thoughtful presentations with comprehensive information in terms of everybody's selections, if you're not selected by the H1B lotteries. And then also, I want to thank everybody for participating in today's event. If unfortunately your question haven't been answered, don't worry about that. Oh, you can either scan the QR code, we can directly connect you with immigration attorney Marta Meng. She will be, happy to assist you if you have any, immigration application needs, or if you need legal assistance in any forms, feel free to contact her and her team. And then if you do have questions on Day 1 CPT, our Day 1 CPT consultants on GoElite and we'll be more than happy to provide our free assistance. So I want to thank everybody for joining today. I want to thank Marta, especially for giving us the presentation as well as the Q&A session. Thank you so much, Marta.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And hopefully we'll do this again very soon. And thanks everybody for coming. And for all of you, have a great night and we'll see you very soon. Thank you.